Hey guys, Ranger Jason Bentley here, coming back to you at the conference center at Ligon Outdoor Center. We talked about some survival activities in one of the earlier videos, and in that we mentioned about shelters. Shelter being one of the basic things that you need to survive. Food, water, and shelter that you have to go out and make an effort to seek to get. So, I'm going to share some tips. I'm going to show you some shelters that we've built here in the woods at Ligon that students have worked on. Going to show you a couple of simple ways to get it started. And you may never find yourself in a situation where you actually have to sleep in an outdoor shelter in the woods for survival. But it was always fun as a kid for me when I would go to my grandparents' house and I could go out and play in the woods. We would build shelters and stick forts out in the woods all the time and see what kind of different designs that we could build. We would build vertical stick forts with a big wall around them. Sometimes we would build horizontal stick forts and just crisscross them up kind of like Lincoln logs and lay them up as a blockade. And just play with one another out in the woods and see what kind of different designs that we could come up with our forts. I had no idea at that time that I was building skills to learn how to build wilderness survival shelters to use in case I was stranded in the woods and had to seek shelter to protect myself. Come on outside, I want to share some of these designs with you and give you a few tips. We're out here in the woods at Ligon and we're talking about shelter building for survival, to protect yourself from the elements. We have several shelters right in this area that I'm going to show you that students have made over the years while they've been at Ligon practicing their shelter buildings. And the next three that I'm going to show you are some of our better ones. I'm going to show you a few that are at the beginning stages, but these three are pretty much completed stage shelters. And a few of them have been here in the woods for a while, so they're starting to show their age. They've not had a lot of stuff added to them as far as more materials, more sticks, more covering, that sort of thing. So they're a little bit old, but they still serve the purpose of the design and the activity. So if you can see this big pile of sticks here, it just looks like a big brush pile. And if you notice the hollow entry area right here, almost like the door, there's a door area. And we have a tree here that had broken off a long time ago. Now this tree used to be up on top of its stump quite a while ago, and since the last time I was here just a few weeks ago, this tree has finally come down off of its stump, and it's still held up by a bunch of sticks underneath there, so it's not going to go any farther down than that. But you can see the covering on here. You can see through it. So if we were actually to use this shelter for survival, I would want to cut more branches from the woods, more trees, more leaves, and cover it up more and get more of a covering on this, because this is pretty windproof right now, but it's not really waterproof. It might hold some of the snow out, but if we got a good rain, we would still get wet inside of this shelter. So it definitely needs a few more things added to it. But you can see I like this design because the people that chose this spot, the students that chose this spot, used a natural vegetative spot for a void, for an area that they could start building their lean-to design, just leaning branches up against it, kind of a lean-to design. So I like that they used what was already here. Hey guys, we move on to a new shelter here. You can see this is a different example, a little bit different design than the last one that we looked at. Same premises, a little bit smaller, but the idea is to protect you from the wind, the rain, the elements, that sort of thing. So as you can see, the person that built this shelter just chose two trees that were growing close together. It's hard to see, but this tree in here had a notch in it, where they set a cross beam on the back side of it. And then they were able to lean to all the other material against the cross beam underneath there. There's a cross beam down here as a header, and there's one on the back side over there that things were leaning. All this debris around here is lean-toed on top of that. And then there was a lot of pine tree branches that were piled up on here, and a lot of leaves that were piled up on top of that, to create an insulation barrier and a moisture barrier. You're not going to get 4, 5, 6 people in this shelter. This is a 1 or 2, very small, which is fine. you don't need to make a huge lodge of a shelter for yourself. If you're making something, you want it to be small. You don't want to expel a ton of extra energy on gathering your sticks, bringing your sticks from one place to carrying them a long way and building them in another spot. The more energy you expel in the wild, the more you have to replace, and that's very difficult to do in a survival situation. So build it to suit your needs. This is up on a hill. It's not down in a wet area where if you have a rain and it washes out, I'm not going to put my shelter right next to a stream that has the potential to flood out and give you a flash flood. I'm not going to put it in a wet ones area where it's constantly wet around it. Up on a nice hill where it dries. It's hard for you to tell from where you're sitting at in front of your computer screen, but this entrance here faces east and southeast, to the east southeast. Why is that? Why is that important? Where does our weather most often come from in our state of Michigan? What direction does the weather come from? Typically the weather in Michigan develops on the west and moves towards the east. Sometimes it will come from the north to the southeast. Sometimes it will come from the southwest up to the northeast. But for the most part, our weather typically comes in from the west. Our wind blows in from the west. So the west and the north is back that way. If I get a snowstorm or a windstorm or rain that's coming from, most likely is going to be coming from that direction, my entrance to my shelter is not open to all that wind and weather blowing into it, okay? I'd have to put a smaller cover over top of my door. I'd have to make a smaller cover for my door to keep that wind out. So this is a perfect example of a small shelter for a person or two, out of the wind, out of the water, up on a hill, a nice dry area. And actually there's quite a bit of area around here for me to be able to see a great distance, to be able to signal for somebody if I needed to get somebody's attention and signal for them. I have a long field of view here. If I was looking for somebody that was coming to help me, I could see them. So all really good points of why this shelter should be right here. So, hey guys, we're at another shelter here. This might be one of my favorite ones just because of the design it was built. As you can see in some of the video, this tree here, this main beam that's the support, is the top of another pine tree that broke off and busted out of the tree and fell and got wedged in between a bunch of smaller trees and saplings. And it's wedged in there good. It's not going anywhere. So it's like a natural roof. It's like the peak line of a roof. And then all the side lean-to has just been, all these branches have just been lean-to and locked in on an angle up against our main support beam here. And then covered up with pine needle branches and leaves. I don't know if you can see behind me, but there's an opening at the other end. If it was cold weather, I would probably close that in, put some more debris in there and fill that in, keep some wind and snow or anything from blowing through it. It's a little bit large. You could get 2 or 3 or so people in here. A lot bigger than just an individual shelter. But the other thing that you got to consider is this big wide opening right here. It's easy to get in and out of, but if you're trying to protect it from the weather and keep the elements out, you would have to enclose this whole area and block it off with something. Now if you had a tarp with you, you could just put a tarp up there. Depends on what equipment that you have with you when you're in this situation. And again, obviously inside, if you had a plastic ground cloth or the emergency blankets that I showed you, the shelter blankets, those aluminum foil looking blankets, you could lay that down or cover up with that also for extra protection. But this would need a little bit extra enclosure here just to keep the wind and the rain and everything from coming in. But it's a really good example, and I will come down here even on the wettest days, and underneath there, even though there's still some holes in the roof, it's still very dry inside of here compared to the rest of the woods. Glad that you guys were able to see some of the shelters. I didn't give you all the tips on how to build them. I would like to see what your skills are just to be able to create some neat designs out in the woods, whether it's building a shelter, building a fort, building some sort of structure that you can play in and hide in with your friends, with your siblings, whoever you have around. See what you can come up with. If you don't have access to woods where you live, or there's not a park, or you don't have a relative where there's any property, don't worry, you'll be able to get back to Ligon Outdoor Center real soon with your school field trips, and this is something that you'll, if you would like and your class would like, you can experience trying to build some of these when you come out to Ligon. Remember, if you're going to build a shelter or collect water or anything, try to get an idea of what time of day you're going to do that. Expel your energy earlier in the day when it's cooler, not so much in the middle of the day when it's hot like this in the summer. But I hope you learned a few tips about building the shelters. Again, there's no right way to build a shelter. Your main purpose is to protect you from the elements, protect you from the wind, from the rain, from the cold, and to give you, just like it says, give you some shelter from those outdoor elements. The main thing is to practice. Go out and practice building one and hone your skills up, hone your outdoor skills. Outdoor skills do not come naturally. You have to practice at them, you have to hone them and keep them sharp. Because believe it or not, even Ranger Jason forgets some tips every once in a while. Until you put them into practice, then it'll come back to you. But best of luck to you. Let me know how everything turns out next time you stop out here and visit me at Ligon.